After Roger's death, the Roger Pirates disbanded. But what if Rayleigh had stepped up to lead the crew? How would Rayleigh, as an Emperor of the Sea, change the story of One Piece? Goldie Roger was gone, but his last words led to the start of a great era of pirates. The Marines were happy that the Pirate King was dead, but they couldn't have imagined how it would affect the world. But one certain pirate believed that he would carry on Roger's legacy. The pirate stood aboard the Oro Jackson with the wind hitting his back. It was none other than the Pirate King's right-hand man, the Dark King Silver's Rayleigh. Rayleigh mourned for a bit, but then he gathered the crew again, the ones willing to join him. Scopper, calm and strong, stood as Rayleigh's rival and his closest ally. Crocus, still sharp as ever, kept them alive through every storm and sickness. Then came the pirate who was merely an apprentice at the time, Shanks. Years passed, and the Roger Pirates grew in strength and reputation once more. More pirates joined up, like Ben Beckman and Yasopp. Others from the old pirate crew gathered around, and Rayleigh was soon recognized as an Emperor of the Sea. He laughed at the title, but he didn't reject it, and with each battle won and each island freed, his legend grew. One day, the crew intercepted a marine transport vessel. Hidden in one of its thick steel crates was a strange fruit covered in swirls and humming with energy, the Gomu Gomu no Mi. Rayleigh recognized it, but he said nothing. He just placed it into a locked chest and kept it close. Later, they docked near Dawn Island to resupply, and there they met a loud little boy named Monkey D. Luffy. Luffy was a joy to hang around with, and he had so much energy and passion. He was 5 at the time when he stumbled onto the devil fruit that Rayleigh had recently picked up, and he was just about to eat it when Rayleigh stopped him with one swift hand and a calm stare. The crew laughed. Rayleigh gave Shanks the fruit, saying it had a strange history. Shanks, still skeptical, ate it anyway, and then everything changed. Shanks hesitated because he wasn't really too fond of the idea of eating a devil fruit, but Rayleigh was insistent. He said that it wasn't because Shanks lacked strength. In fact, he'd become among the strongest pirates on the sea. It was because he felt that it was his destiny. Shanks eventually gave in and frowned when his arms stretched like ropes, but Rayleigh and the crew laughed before he told Shanks that he'd soon make this power his own. Luffy begged to join the crew, even if he was just a kid. Rayleigh said yes, but only as an apprentice. He would clean, carry, and watch, maybe learn a thing or two if he stopped shouting long enough. Now, with a new rubber man and a screaming child, Rayleigh set a course for a land tied to the past, Wano. He wanted to meet with someone who once sailed with him, someone who'd become a part of the family, but there had been no word about him for the past few years, Kozuki Oden. Rayleigh was done with making preparations, and so the crew set sail to Wano. The Oro Jackson sailed through calm waves and stormy skies bound for Wano. On deck, Rayleigh stood beside Shanks, both barefoot and bruised from another round of training. Shanks already had incredible hockey and swordsmanship, but with his new body, he needed more training to get used to it. And what better way than sparring? A rubber body meant more than flailing limbs. It meant momentum, recoil, absorption. Shanks learned to wrap his arms around cannonballs and fling them back. He learned to stretch his punches around corners. He coated his limbs in hockey, mixing bounce with brute force. But in time, Shanks grew faster. Smarter, his hockey laced every strike like lightning wrapped in rubber. The laughter faded when Wano came into view. They expected to see old banners and familiar smiles. Instead, they saw smoke. When they landed, they saw people who were in bad condition, starving and unable to properly sustain themselves. And there were pirates here, the Beast Pirates. Upon further inspection, the crew soon discovered that Kozuki Oden was dead. He was killed 6 years ago by Kaido, who had now taken hold of the country. Rayleigh closed his eyes and clenched his fists. He was angry at himself and guilty for having taken so long to check on an old friend. He had thought that his old friend would have stayed alive just a little longer, but now his country was crushed. Rayleigh stood still, feeling every second he had wasted. Then he turned around, and the crew felt a shift in the air as hockey rolled off of him. Luffy had never seen his captain look so serious, but now he would take back Wano. Rayleigh declared war, and the crew headed for Onigashima. The Roger Pirates came down like thunder. Scopper was the first into the shocked Beast Pirates as his twin axes tore through them. Every swing knocked men flying through walls. Others dropped without knowing what hit them. He spun once, buried both axes into the ground, and caused a small shockwave that cracked the pavement. Ben Beckman aimed his rifle, and each shot found a neck, a hand, a blade mid-swing. Shanks himself tested out the strength of his newfound abilities and danced through the battlefield with speed, bouncing around and taking down any pirate in his way. His hockey surged, black lightning crackling across his limbs. He wrapped one arm around a tower, pulled, and launched himself forward, crashing through a group of gifters. Shanks stood up, dusted off, and stretched both arms behind his head like ropes. He grabbed 2 stunned enemies and slammed them into each other in midair. Then came Jacka King and Queen, the 3 strongest commanders of the Beast Pirates. Shanks, Scopper, and Beckman went to face them, while Rayleigh himself walked toward Kaido, who sat on his throne inside the main fortress with a massive jug of sake in his hand. For the first time in years, Kaido's grin was genuine. He rose slowly, picked up his kanabo, and cracked the stone beneath his feet. He was excited at getting to fight the right-hand man of the former Pirate King. Kaido stepped forward with his kanabo on his shoulder, while Rayleigh took out his sword. And then the two lunged at each other in an impact that sent waves of Conqueror's hockey crashing around them. Rayleigh then sidestepped and slashed Kaido's arm, and it cut, much to Kaido's surprise. Kaido grinned and roared hard as he began exchanging blows with Rayleigh. Then, the strongest creature roared and leapt backward, his massive form shifting violently. Scales erupted all over his body as he grew larger and larger, transforming into a colossal dragon that loomed over the battlefield. His eyes blazed like molten gold as he opened his gargantuan maw and unleashed his devastating bolo breath. A torrent of scorching flames aimed directly at Rayleigh. With reflexes honed by years of battle, Rayleigh dodged the first blast by sliding swiftly to the side, narrowly escaping the searing inferno. But the second wave came fast, and this time, Rayleigh raised his saber to deflect the fiery onslaught, sparks flying as heat clashed with steel. Using the momentum, he launched himself upward into the air, closing the distance between himself and the mighty dragon with calculated precision. Mid-flight, Rayleigh slammed his blade hard against Kaido's massive head, the impact echoing like a thunderclap across the ruined landscape. The force sent Kaido reeling, crashing down into the rubble-strewn ground with a thunderous boom. But before Rayleigh could land safely, Kaido recovered quickly, shifting into his intimidating hybrid form, half man, half dragon, swinging his terrifying Kanabo. The brutal weapon swung down with brutal force. Rayleigh raised his arm just in time to block the blow, the Kanabo crashing against his forearm with explosive power. The shockwave threw Rayleigh backward through two shattered walls, debris raining down around him. He tumbled hard but quickly rolled to his feet, eyes blazing with determination. Without hesitation, he charged again, his movements fluid and relentless. The two clashed in a wide open field just outside the capital, the sounds of their fierce battle echoing through the war-torn landscape. Around them, the two crews fought with fierce bloodlust. Marines and pirates locked in desperate combat. Rayleigh endured heavy hits, his coat torn and shredded, his body bearing numerous fresh wounds, but his spirit remained unbroken, pushing him ever forward. Kaido lunged forward in a flying tackle, jaws bared and claws ready to rend, but Rayleigh anticipated the move. With a quick sidestep, he dodged the assault and plunged his sword deep into Kaido's massive scar, eliciting a low growl of pain from the Emperor. Seizing the moment, Rayleigh twisted sharply, spinning with practiced grace before swinging his sword in a wide, devastating arc. Coated in advanced armament haki, the slash crackled with fierce black lightning, cutting deeply across Kaido's scaled chest. The very sky above them seemed to crackle and shatter in response. Kaido dropped heavily to one knee, breathing ragged, his mighty chest heaving. He raised his Kanabo in a last desperate swing, but Rayleigh was already closing the distance, faster than a striking serpent. His fist, enveloped in intense conqueror's haki, slammed squarely into Kaido's face. The impact roared like thunder, snapping Kaido's head back violently. The Emperor's colossal body lifted off the ground and crashed hard several meters away, sending shockwaves through the earth. Behind Rayleigh, the other beast pirates had fallen one after the other, and with their captain gone, the fodder simply began running away. And soon enough, the war was won, and Wano was free. Rayleigh had liberated the people and set up a system to govern it. He'd also found a young girl who called herself Odin, a girl named Yamato. She spoke with pride and stomped around like she was already a pirate, and Rayleigh loved the energy. He took her on board as an apprentice, although she was at least 9 years older than Luffy. Kazuki Hayori had also come out of hiding, the only blood relative left of Odin. She was only 12, but she'd had to grow up much faster because of everything she had to face after her father died. But the people accepted her, and Wano would have a future again. Before leaving, Rayleigh planted the flag of the Roger Pirates near the coast, signaling to anyone dumb enough to invade that the land was under his protection, and then they set sail again. The news of Kaido's fall spread like wildfire across the New World, and the Marines were baffled that two emperors had fought, and they were worried about what this could mean, as the Roger Pirates were gaining power equal to what they had at Roger's time. On the Moby Dick, Whitebeard laughed at the news, while elsewhere, Big Mom narrowed her eyes. She didn't like the shift in power. Kaido had been a beast, but a predictable one. Rayleigh was different though, and she would have a much harder time dealing with him. She realized that it would be best to avoid confrontation altogether. After what had happened at Wano, Rayleigh realized that it would mean a bigger target on his back, but he wasn't going to shy away from what he had to do. Rayleigh already knew about the Void Sentry, the Poneglyphs, and Joy Boy, though he didn't know what Nika really meant, only that it mattered. He was training Shanks to become the new hope for the world, but he needed more information, and what better place than Elbap? Rayleigh had visited it before on his journey, and knew there was more information which he had ignored there before. He'd have to meet with King Harold, and maybe he could convince the king to give him his aid as well. He knew he'd have to fight the world government, and the moment would come sooner rather than later. Rayleigh was strong, but he wasn't that young anymore. He needed allies. Elba was full of warriors who respected courage and freedom, and if anyone could be convinced to stand against the storm that was coming, it would be them. Soon the crew arrived at the massive island of the giants, and they docked there. The crew stepped onto the shore, met by warriors and giants. There were already quite a bunch of people there, since someone else had apparently returned during this time as well. It was the infamous Prince of Elba, Loki. Loki himself felt the arrival of the crew and recognized the Jolly Roger. He was interested in seeing what the big fuss of an emperor was, and so he demanded a match with Rayleigh. Rayleigh laughed at the proposition and told Loki that he could fight Shanks first. The giants laughed as Shanks stretched his arms and cracked his knuckles. Loki raised one brow and frowned, holding Ragnir. He wasn't too happy with being thrown a chump to fight him, so he decided he would end this fight quickly. Loki charged forward and, with a swoop, smashed the hammer down hard at Shanks. But Shanks simply blocked the hammer with his sword coated in advanced Conqueror's hockey. Loki was shocked that the tiny human could bear the force of Ragnir. Then Shanks bounced off the ground and stretched his arm backward like a whip before punching Loki right in the face, making him stagger. Loki finally got serious, and the two began exchanging blows. The fight was creating a real mess of the surroundings. But then, Jarl showed up, one of the ancient warriors of Elbaf. He forcefully stopped the fight and told both Loki and Rayleigh that they were being called to the king. Together, they walked through the winding stone paths of Elbaf until they reached Orrest Castle. But something was wrong. As they neared the throne room, Loki narrowed his eyes. The guards were too stiff, and they were trying to keep him from entering. He didn't listen to them, though, and simply burst through the throne room doors, only to find Harold pierced through with numerous spears. Loki roared, his face twisting in fury, and his voice shook the castle. He stormed forward and slammed his hammer into the guards. Rayleigh followed, drawing his saber while he was running, and began taking out other guards. The guards began attacking the new enemy, but the odd part was this: even lethal wounds didn't stop them. They moved like monsters, as if something unnatural was keeping them going. It wasn't until Rayleigh started using advanced Conqueror's hockey that the wounds began sticking, and Loki did the same. But these men were powerful. The chaos was heard in the distance, and Rayleigh's crew quickly rushed to the castle along with other guards. The throne room became a battlefield. Rayleigh realized that these people were from the world government. The gods' knights had been moving in the shadows for years, but to strike here at a giant king, that meant something big was brewing. The ambush was a setup, and King Harold had been marked. Some of the guards had escaped outside as Rayleigh's crew reached the castle with giant warriors, and they formed the story that the Roger pirates and Prince Loki had attacked and killed King Harold. It was utter chaos as the giant warriors began attacking the Roger pirates. The island roared with anger. Trumpets blasted. Warriors stormed out of their halls, calling for justice. Ships were prepared. Boulders loaded into slings. The sky above Elbaf boiled with fury. Rayleigh stood at the castle gates, surrounded by his crew as they were fighting against mostly the giant warriors now. They had no time to explain, and no one was there to justify Rayleigh's testimony. All they could do now was escape. Rayleigh told Loki to follow him out of this chaos, and the crew retreated. But before Loki left, he entered the great vault beneath the castle, where Elbaf's oldest treasure was kept, a devil fruit known as the Inu Inu no Mi model skull, the mythical beast that chases and devours the sun. The company retreated while fighting off giants and quickly set sail on the Oro Jackson, a ship Loki had stolen that could support his weight. Spears and boulders were flung their way, and giant cannons fired across the sea. It was a misunderstanding that had turned the Roger pirates into enemies of the giants. They had come here for aid, but the only one with them now was Loki. Definitely not the outcome they wanted. Now, miles away on a distant, nameless island surrounded by sea fog, the two ships docked quietly. They rested in silence, far from the chaos they had left behind. Rayleigh stood near the fire as Loki stepped forward. He clenched his fist with the devil fruit in the other hand and proclaimed that the world government would pay for killing his father. He then bit down into the fruit, and the prince's body, filled with power, shifted. His muscles stretched. Fur burst from his skin. His limbs thickened, and his mouth grew long and sharp. His eyes burned like molten gold. He became a wolf, but not just any wolf. It was a massive, ancient beast from legend. Skull. His roar echoed across the ocean before Loki turned back into a giant. Rayleigh didn't flinch. He stepped forward and looked up at Loki. He would help him get his revenge. The Roger pirates stood in a loose circle with Loki sitting behind them. Luffy sat on a barrel, watching with wide eyes. Yamato held her breath, while Crocus tightened the bandages around one of Rayleigh's arms. Rayleigh looked at them all and told them that it wasn't going to be easy sailing moving forward. He told the members who didn't know about the Void Century everything he knew. The world government had tipped its hand and had tried to silence the past. They had framed them and made a mess of Elbaf. Now, the Roger pirates would be chased to the ends of the seas. But Rayleigh didn't plan on running. He had a strong crew, and he wasn't senile yet. He decided that they would take the war to the world government itself, and the first step would be to form an alliance with others. The Marines heard of it quickly, and spy networks were activated. Cypher Pole agents passed messages in whispers. Bases doubled their guard. Admirals began relocating across the seas, and Mary Jawaz was being reinforced. Rayleigh kept moving. His first stop was Tado Land, the kingdom of Big Mom. He arrived with his full crew, but Charlotte Linland didn't even meet him at the docks. Her army of homies blocked the way, and a voice echoed from her citadel, cold and uninterested. She said that she wasn't going to join Rayleigh's stupid crusade, and that if he wanted war, she could happily give it to him. Despite the fact that she wasn't too keen on fighting the Roger pirates after what they'd done with the Beast pirates, Rayleigh didn't argue much either, since there was no point if Big Mom had made up her mind. He turned around and sailed on, tracking down the infamous Moby Dick. Whitebeard's flag towered above the sea like a shadow made of pride. Rayleigh approached without hiding, without rushing. The crew stood on opposite ships as Rayleigh leaped onto the deck of the Moby Dick. Whitebeard sat on his seat as he met Rayleigh, and the two greeted each other with a massive clash of Whitebeard's Bacento with Rayleigh's saber. The shockwave split the air above them. Both smiled as they pulled back their weapons, and the old men shared a drink. Over the sake, Rayleigh told Whitebeard about everything that he knew and what had happened at Elbaf, the prophecy, and the devil fruit Shanks had. Whitebeard had already been told about the true history by Roger and knew that there were things going on that would forever change the seas. Whitebeard stayed silent for a long time. His fingers tightened around his weapon. His eyes stared past the sea, as if looking back through time. He thought of Odin, of Roger, of the empty throne. Then he nodded once. He called for Shanks and saw the strength in the young man. Whitebeard agreed to the alliance and told Rayleigh that he would stand by his side once more. In the next few weeks, Rayleigh gathered up other allies and pirates. Most importantly, the Mink tribes from Zu Inuarashi and Nekomamushi, leaders of the Mink tribe, were part of the Roger pirates when they were young. They would not stay back and let Rayleigh go to war alone, especially not after what happened at Wano. The alliance set sail. Rayleigh stood atop the mast of the Oro Jackson and looked toward the red line in the distance. Mary Jawaz, the seat of the celestial dragons and the highest point in the world, would fall today. Marines had gathered up their forces as the Roger alliance had arrived. Ships soared through clouds. Giants climbed the cliffside. Minks dashed across rooftops, lightning sparking under their feet. Marines met them at the top, a full wall of justice, and the battle officially began. Scopper met with Fleet Admiral Sengoku as the Golden Buddha clashed against iron axes. Sengoku stood like a mountain, but Scopper wasn't going to let him have his way. Sengoku sent shockwaves pulsing with each strike of his fists. Scopper spun between them, his twin axes a blur. Every swing chipped at Sengoku's massive body, blowing apart the battlefield. Scopper leaped into the air, spun like a drill, and slammed his weapons down, causing a crater in the marble floor. Sengoku responded with a palm strike that blasted Scopper through a government tower, but the man got back up, spat out blood, and grinned. Meanwhile, Garp met Whitebeard in a clash. The air cracked between them as fists and tremors collided. Whitebeard split the ground beneath Mary Jawaz with a single quake punch, sending Marines flying in every direction. Garp responded with a punch so fast it caught the shockwave midair and dissipated it. They traded blows that warped the air, with neither of the two holding back. One punch from Garp sent Whitebeard through 3 stone pillars. One quake from Whitebeard sent cracks up the red line, just enough to shake the celestial dragons in their thrones. Marco himself was dealing with Marines left and right, taking out vice admirals and supporting the others. Rayleigh himself fought against former Fleet Admiral Kong. Kong charged forward like a war tank, muscle and hockey crashing through every wall. Rayleigh met him with clean sword strikes, flowing like water, each slash wrapped in black lightning. Kong threw Rayleigh through a building, but Rayleigh appeared behind him the next instant and stabbed deep into his shoulder. Blood spilled. Kong roared and slammed his fist down, but Rayleigh rolled under and returned the favor with a hockey-infused kick to the jaw. Loki and Shanks were going on an absolute rampage as they tore through the battlefield. In his full skull form, Loki towered over Marines and buildings. His claws shredded through their ranks, and he was taking down Marines at a frightening pace. A bunch of them panicked and left their posts when they saw the massive wolf approaching. Shanks himself was cutting through everyone like butter as they closed in on Pangaea Castle. 3 vice admirals tried to stop him, but they were gone in minutes. In the middle of the chaos, Shanks broke through as 2 admirals went for him, but he'd unlocked a new weapon with his training and intelligence. He released something from deep inside himself, and his heartbeat changed into a drum. His hair went white, and clouds floated around him. Not Gear 5 as Luffy knew it, but something awakened from the same strange devil fruit, something just as wild. With his cartoonish power fully unleashed, he bounced wildly from wall to wall, twisting and flipping through the ranks of admiral formations like a whirlwind of chaos. Each movement was unpredictable yet precise, a blur that left Marine soldiers scrambling to keep up. At one point, he caught Kizaru's blinding light beam, a flickering saber of pure energy, and with a swift, fluid motion, sliced clean through the admiral's defense, sparks flying as the light dissipated. Without hesitation, he faced Sakazuki's molten magma fist head-on, enduring the burning impact with a grin before grabbing hold and throwing the fiery admiral away like a ragdoll caught in a storm. Nearby, Shanks moved gracefully, but with deadly intent, dancing across the battlefield like a force of nature. Ben Beckman and Yasop fought alongside him, their sharpshooting and cunning tactics wreaking havoc on the Marine forces. The battlefield was alive with clashing powers, cries of battle, and the smell of smoke and blood. Suddenly, the air shifted as the 5 elders arrived, flanked by the ominous gods' knights. The knights emerged from the castle gates, their bodies radiating strange devil fruit powers that defied logic. No matter how many times they were struck down, a mysterious force kept them standing, seemingly immortal. The pirates and allies exchanged grim looks, but were far from daunted. Fortunately, the alliance was bolstered by numerous warriors who had mastered Advanced Conqueror's Haki, an ability Rayleigh had specifically instructed them to deploy against these unnatural foes. Without hesitation, they channeled their Haki with fierce determination. Having just finished his confrontation with Kong, Rayleigh swiftly joined Shanks and Scopper, meeting the elders head-on. At the same time, fierce combat erupted as other alliance fighters, including the powerful Inuarashi and Nekomamushi, engaged the gods' knights, their own devilish powers clashing in a spectacular display of strength and will. Shanks, now in Gear 5, exerted an earth-shattering force as he bent the very ground beneath him and hurled it toward the elders, forcing them to reveal their terrifying yokai forms. In this monstrous state, they grew even more formidable. Yet Shanks was an absolute beast. His awakened devil fruit powers, amplified by his unrivaled Haki, made him a living legend on the battlefield. With Rayleigh Rayleigh and Scopper providing steadfast support, the trio wove through the Elder's attacks, striking with precision and overwhelming power. Saturn's massive legs slammed into the earth, sending shockwaves that rippled across the field. Scopper expertly rolled beneath one giant limb, then hurled a spinning axe skyward, slicing through a monstrous arm with surgical accuracy. In response, shadowy tendrils erupted from the severed limb, lunging at him like living darkness. Rayleigh intervened instantly, his blade shimmering with advanced hockey as he sliced through the shadows with clean, glowing arcs, protecting his ally. From above, Mars descended like a fiery tempest, engulfing the battlefield in raging flames. But Shanks seemed almost to feed off the heat, his gear 5 form absorbing the intense energy like steam. With a joyous laugh, he launched himself forward, grabbing Mars by the arm midair, twisting and flipping the Elder into a nearby stone wall, cracking it as if it were glass. Warcurry, snorting furiously, charged forward with earth-shaking steps. Scopper met him head-on, axes clashing against the boar-like tusks with bone-crushing force. The ground cracked and cratered beneath him, but Scopper's grip never faltered. With a mighty roar, he wedged one axe under Warcurry's chin and slammed the other into his gut. The clash sent a shockwave through the battlefield, now a blur of light, darkness, laughter, and fury. But then the earth trembled violently, and the atmosphere thickened as a new, ominous presence made itself known. The true ruler of the world, Emu, descended upon the battlefield. A heavy silence fell, broken only by the crackling of dark energy. Emu summoned a vast, ancient book of spells, its pages glowing with arcane symbols. Without warning, Emu unleashed a relentless barrage of deadly magical weapons, ranged attacks, curses, and twisted conjurations toward the Alliance. But help had arrived. Whitebeard, Loki, Ben Beckman, and Marco stood with the 3 legends, determined to hold the line against the Elders and protect their comrades. The battle reached a new fever pitch as the Alliance held strong, allowing Rayleigh and Shanks to carve a path toward Emu. The air itself seemed to warp under Emu's command, shadows swirling and twisting like living things, wrapping around some of the allied fighters. These strange energies didn't corrupt them outright, but instead drove them into chaotic frenzies as if ancient, malevolent forces possessed their minds. A column of pitch-black energy exploded suddenly beneath Rayleigh and Shanks, vaporizing the marble beneath their feet. The two reacted instantly, dodging sharply in opposite directions to avoid being swallowed whole by the void. Rayleigh struck first, his saber glowing with a sharp black hockey. Emu raised a hand calmly, forming a sphere of nothingness that sucked in the blade, making it vanish briefly before it reappeared behind Emu, aimed straight at their neck. Emu barely tilted aside, narrowly avoiding the fatal slash. In retaliation, they whipped a lash of arcane magic at Shanks, who twisted and bounced off the shattered floor, rubbery limbs flaring with hockey. He brought down a massive fist, but Emu blocked with their palm, the resulting shockwave flattening the ruins around them. Black lightning crackled wildly in every direction. Emu raised both arms, summoning chains of shadow from the earth that lashed out toward Shanks. Ever nimble, Shanks spun and stretched, grabbing the chains and skillfully tying them into a knot before slingshotting himself at Emu's chest. Rayleigh rejoined with a powerful hockey-coated kick to Emu's side, knocking them into a far wall. The wall cracked, but Emu stood unfazed, a faint smile playing across their lips. In a sudden offensive, a wave of energy burst forth, splitting into hundreds of razor-sharp black blades that flew in every direction. Rayleigh blocked dozens with his blade, while Shanks narrowly dodged many more, though a few blades still grazed and cut them. Just then, a booming roar split the air as a meteor-like figure crashed down from the sky. Garp charged Emu with a fist wrapped in roaring hockey, barely raising a defense before crashing Emu into a crater with overwhelming force. Standing beside Rayleigh and Shanks, Garp's grim eyes burned with resolve. This monster, the so-called ruler of the world, was an abomination that had gone too far. He refused to be part of any farce that allowed it to continue. Together, the 3 legends moved as a storm incarnate. Rayleigh clashed fiercely with Emu, who conjured more dark blades to fend him off. Shanks punched through Emu's defenses with his immense power, while Garp's fist slammed mercilessly into the terrain, crumbling towers behind Emu with each devastating blow. Frustration twisted Emu's expression as they warped space itself, trying desperately to evade the combined onslaught. The relentless conqueror's hockey, radiating from the trio, made regeneration slower and slower, the wounds refusing to heal fast enough. Suddenly, a massive earthquake shook the battlefield as Whitebeard landed nearby, his fist smashing the ground with titanic force. Taking advantage, Rayleigh sliced through the darkness around Emu, allowing Shanks and Garp to land punishing blows. Though battered and glitching, robes torn, skin flickering with strange, unstable energy, Emu stood defiantly. Raising their arms, they prepared to unleash a final devastating attack, causing the earth itself to buckle and fracture. But before the attack could manifest, Shanks charged at blinding speed, his fist growing monstrously large, like an island-sized hammer crackling with black lightning hockey. The immense punch descended with full force, smashing into Emu in a thunderous explosion. A colossal shockwave rippled outwards, shaking the entire battlefield. And then suddenly silence. As the smoke cleared, Emu's form dissolved into plumes of black smoke, vanishing without a trace. The other God's Knight's unnatural regeneration faltered faltered as well, and the Alliance seized the moment, cutting down their enemies one after another. Even the ancient elders rapidly aged, their bodies crumbling to bones before the eyes of all. Shanks stood steady, supported by Rayleigh, both battered but triumphant. The Alliance raised a victorious cry that echoed across the battlefield. Against all odds, they had defeated the world government's darkest power, and the tides of history had shifted forever. Make sure to subscribe and hit the like button for more One Piece videos.